Daniel Kovacs started building a cabin that was half conventional surface structure and half carved into a shallow limestone hillside cave in Wyoming territory during summer 1883. And when his neighbors realized the 35-year-old Hungarian miner was planning to live in a structure where the back rooms were literally dug into the earth, while the front remained above ground, they were certain he was creating a death trap that would collapse and bury him alive. Not just risky, genuinely suicidal, because everyone knew you built cabins on the ground, not into it. You didn't dig rooms into hillsides like a mine shaft and call it housing. The earth would shift, collapse, cave in. Water would seep through and flood the underground portions. The structure would be unstable, dangerous, a disaster waiting to happen that would kill anyone foolish enough to sleep in it. A bachelor miner, building alone, creating a cabin that was half house, half burrow, defying every principle of safe construction. People didn't just think it was poor planning. They thought Daniel was applying mining techniques inappropriately, confusing tunnel excavation with home building in ways that would prove fatal. Daniel Kovacs had come to Wyoming territory in 1879 from Hungary, where his family had been miners for 3 generations. Daniel had learned underground excavation, rock stability assessment, and ventilation systems working in European coal and copper mines. He understood how to read rock formations, recognize stable versus unstable earth, and create safe underground spaces. By 1883, Daniel had saved enough money working Wyoming mines to buy land and build his own place. He chose 80 acres on a hillside location where a shallow limestone cave, more of a rock shelter really, extended about 15 feet into the hill with a wide opening facing south. Daniel examined the cave with professional knowledge. The limestone was solid bedrock. The ceiling was stable with no cracks. There were no signs of active erosion or water infiltration problems. This wasn't a deep cave system. It was a shallow overhang created by ancient erosion, maybe 20 feet wide and 15 feet deep into the hillside. Most settlers would have built a conventional cabin nearby and perhaps used the cave for storage. Daniel had a different vision. Build the cabin into the hillside, using the cave as the back portion while extending conventional construction forward from the cave mouth. The design was radical but methodical. The back 15 feet of the cabin would be excavated further into the hillside, creating 2 underground bedrooms, one on each side of the existing cave opening, extending the shallow cave into proper rooms. The front 18 feet would be conventional surface construction, walls built up from ground level, peaked roof, normal cabin appearance. The result would be a 33-foot deep cabin where the front third was above ground and the back 2/3 were carved into the hillside. The advantages were clear to Daniel. The underground portions would maintain stable temperature year-round, just like mine tunnels did, requiring minimal heating. The front portion would provide normal light, access, and conventional living space. The hybrid design would combine the best of both approaches, surface convenience with underground thermal stability. When Daniel explained this plan to his neighbor Walter Morrison, a practical rancher, Walter's reaction was immediate horror. "Daniel, you're planning to dig rooms into a hillside and sleep in them. That's not a cabin. That's a mine shaft you're calling housing. The earth will collapse on you. You'll be buried alive in the structure you built." "The limestone is solid bedrock, very stable. I've assessed it professionally. The excavation will be properly supported with timber framing. This is standard mining practice applied to housing." Mining and housing are completely different. Mines are temporary spaces you work in and leave. Homes are permanent spaces you live in continuously. You can't just dig into a hillside, prop it up with timbers, and call it safe housing. The first heavy rain or ground shift will bring thousands of pounds of earth down on your head while you sleep. I've worked in underground mines for 15 years. I understand rock stability better than anyone here understands cabin construction. This hybrid design will be more stable and more efficient than any conventional cabin. Walter shook his head with genuine fear for Daniel's safety. Even if the Earth doesn't collapse, which it will, you're creating an unhealthy living space. The back rooms will be damp, dark, airless. You'll get sick from breathing underground air. You'll go mad from living partly buried. Daniel, this isn't innovation, it's deadly foolishness. But Daniel had already committed. He started construction in June 1883 with careful excavation planning. First, Daniel expanded the existing shallow cave. The natural limestone overhang extended 15 feet into the hillside. Daniel excavated 2 additional rooms, one on each side of the cave opening, extending them another 15 feet into the earth. Each room measured 8 feet by 10 feet, bedroom-sized spaces carved into solid limestone. The excavation work took 6 weeks of careful labor. Daniel used mining techniques, drilling test holes to check rock stability, installing heavy timber supports as he progressed, creating proper drainage channels to prevent water accumulation. Each room's ceiling was supported by timber beams every 4 feet. The walls were bare limestone, no finishing needed since the rock was stable and dry. Neighbors who saw Daniel digging into the hillside were increasingly alarmed. "Kovac is digging a grave and planning to live in it," people said in town. "He's excavating rooms into the earth like a mole. It's not natural, it's not safe." Sarah Bennett, who ran the general store, expressed the common concern when Daniel bought supplies. "Daniel, everyone is worried you're going to get yourself killed. You're digging underground rooms to sleep in. The earth above those rooms weighs thousands of pounds. What happens when it shifts or collapses? You'll be crushed or buried alive. Please, build a normal cabin on the surface where it's safe. The limestone is more stable than any wood cabin. Rock doesn't rot, doesn't burn, doesn't blow away in wind. The underground rooms are safer than surface construction, not more dangerous. But they're underground. Humans aren't meant to live buried in the earth. Even if the structure doesn't collapse, you'll suffocate from bad air or go mad from the darkness and isolation. This hybrid cabin idea is applying mining knowledge where it doesn't belong. But Daniel kept working through July and into August. By early September, he had the underground portions complete, 2 bedrooms carved into the hillside, each 8 by 10 feet, with limestone ceilings supported by heavy timbers, drainage channels cut into the floors. The space is dry and solid. Now came the front portion, conventional surface construction extending forward from the hillside. Daniel built walls rising from ground level, creating a main room 18 feet deep and 20 feet wide. He built a peaked roof covering the front portion. He installed a door in the front wall and windows for light. The front section looked like a normal cabin, until you saw how it extended back into the hillside where the underground rooms waited. The hybrid structure was bizarre visually. From the front, it looked like a conventional cabin built against a hillside. But walking through the front door and proceeding to the back, you'd find doorways leading to rooms that were literally carved into the earth. Limestone walls and ceilings, timber supports visible, underground sleeping quarters. Walter Morrison brought several other ranchers when the construction was nearly complete. "Daniel, we've watched you build this structure. The front looks normal, but the back is just rooms dug into the hillside with timber holding up thousands of pounds of rock. This is the most dangerous housing I've ever seen. You're planning to sleep in those underground rooms with earth and rock above your head, supported only by timber beams. When, not if, but when, those supports shift or rot or fail, you'll be killed in your sleep. The timber supports are over-engineered. The limestone ceiling is solid bedrock that has existed for thousands of years and will exist for thousands more. I've used mining safety principles that keep men alive in far less stable underground conditions. This is safer than it looks. It looks like a death trap. Daniel, even if we're wrong about collapse, which we're not, This structure is still deeply problematic. Half your cabin is underground. Those back rooms will be dark, damp, cold, unhealthy. You're creating living conditions that will make you sick, even if they don't kill you from cave-in. Daniel had to resist explaining that the underground rooms would actually be warmer and more stable than the surface front room, because he knew they wouldn't believe him without proof. He just said quietly, "Winter will test whether the design works. If I'm wrong, the consequences are mine to face." Daniel moved into his hybrid cabin in mid-September 1883. The immediate experience surprised even him with how well the design functioned. The front room, conventional surface construction, was bright, airy, convenient for cooking and daily activities. The back rooms, carved into the hillside, were indeed darker, but not completely black. Some daylight penetrated from the front room, and lanterns provided adequate light. More importantly, the temperature in the underground rooms was remarkably stable, approximately 55 degrees constantly, regardless of exterior conditions. Daniel set up his bed in one underground room and used the other for storage. The sleeping quarters were quiet, stable temperature, secure feeling in ways surface rooms never achieved. The limestone walls radiated a constant coolness in summer that was comfortable. As fall arrived and exterior temperatures dropped, the underground rooms maintained their 55 degrees while requiring zero heating. The hybrid design created natural temperature zoning. The front surface room responded to exterior conditions, warmer in sun, colder at night. The back underground rooms stayed constant. Daniel could heat just the front room for cooking and daytime activities while sleeping in the stable temperature underground bedroom that never needed heating. But Daniel stayed quiet about the success. He knew moderate fall weather wouldn't convince people who were certain his structure was a death trap. He needed extreme conditions to prove the hybrid design's value. The first significant test came in November when temperature dropped to 5 degrees overnight. Daniel's experience was illuminating. Front room, surface construction, required substantial fire to maintain 50 degrees, typical cabin performance. Back underground rooms maintained 55 degrees with zero heating. The earth insulation was working exactly as mining experience had taught Daniel it would. Daniel slept in his underground bedroom at comfortable temperature while the surface front room cooled overnight. He woke to the underground room still at 55 degrees, no fire needed, no temperature drop, just stable, earth-insulated environment. December brought colder conditions. Exterior temperatures reached 15 below. Daniel's hybrid cabin showed its true advantages. Front room, heavy heating required to maintain 48 degrees, standard cabin struggles. Underground rooms, still 55 degrees, constant, unchanging. The deep earth insulation was completely unaffected by surface cold. Daniel was using approximately 30% of the firewood a conventional full-sized cabin would require because he only heated 1/3 of his living space, the front room. The sleeping quarters required zero fuel. The hybrid design was dramatically more efficient than conventional construction. But Daniel knew these moderate tests wouldn't convince skeptics. He needed brutal conditions, the kind that would make the difference between his hybrid cabin and conventional structures impossible to ignore. That test came in January 1884, when a blizzard struck Wyoming territory with violence that would freeze conventional cabins and prove Daniel's hybrid earth-integrated design to be superior in ways nobody had anticipated. It started January 12th as heavy snow. By evening it was a blizzard with wind strong enough to shake structures. By midnight it was catastrophic, temperature dropping to 36 below zero, wind at speeds that tore roofs apart, snow so heavy that visibility was zero, and accumulation measured in feet. Daniel woke January 13th to his hybrid cabin being tested like never before. The wind was violent enough that he could hear it screaming around the front surface portion of his structure. Snow was piling against his front door and walls. Temperature outside was 36 below and still falling. Inside Daniel's cabin, front room, surface portion, 42 degrees despite heavy fire in the stove. The surface walls and roof, exposed to brutal exterior cold and wind, were conducting temperature despite Daniel's best heating efforts. Back underground rooms, 58 degrees with zero heating. The earth-insulated portions, protected by tons of stable limestone, were completely unaffected by the surface chaos. In fact, the underground rooms were slightly warmer than usual because heat from the desperately heated front room was migrating back into the earth-sheltered spaces. Daniel moved between his front room and back bedroom, experiencing a remarkable contrast. The front room required constant fire and still struggled to maintain adequate warmth. The back underground bedroom, carved into the hillside, insulated by earth and rock, stayed comfortably warm with no heating whatsoever. The hybrid design was proving its value. Daniel could heat just the front room for cooking and daytime activities, while sleeping in the underground room that maintained comfortable temperature automatically. He was using maybe 1/4 the firewood a full conventional cabin would require, while actually staying warmer than conventional cabin owners. But Daniel's comfort was unique. Across Wyoming territory, people in conventional full-surface cabins were discovering that adequate construction became deadly during extreme conditions. 3 miles away, Walter Morrison's cabin, well-built, 16 by 20 feet, all surface construction, was failing catastrophically. The temperature inside had dropped to -2 degrees, despite Walter burning wood desperately. The entire structure, exposed to 36 below exterior temperature and violent wind, couldn't retain heat. The cabin that had seemed adequate during normal cold was now a death trap. Walter's wife Anna and their 3 children were in severe danger from hypothermia despite being indoors with a fire. The children were lethargic and confused. Anna was showing dangerous symptoms, slurred speech, loss of coordination. Walter was burning furniture to supplement depleted firewood, but nothing was maintaining survivable temperature in a structure that was all surface exposed with no earth insulation. The blizzard continued through January 14th with no break. Temperature reached 38 below. Wind sustained at levels that were destroying structures across the territory. And inside surface cabins, people were dying from hypothermia in their own homes. On the morning of January 15th, the 3rd day, Walter Morrison made a desperate decision. His cabin was maintaining 0 degrees despite burning everything combustible. His youngest son, Thomas, had stopped responding normally. He was drowsy, and his breathing was shallow. If they stayed, Thomas would die before the blizzard ended. Walter remembered Daniel Kovach's hybrid cabin with the underground rooms everyone had mocked. Walter had told Daniel the structure was a death trap. But now, Walter's own proper cabin was killing his family, while Daniel's half-buried cabin might, just might, be warmer than conventional construction. The journey from Walter's cabin to Daniel's place was 2 miles through deadly conditions. It became a nightmare that nearly killed them all. Walter bundled his family in every blanket and coat they owned. He carried Thomas, who was barely conscious. Anna held their daughter Emma, who was crying weakly. Their oldest son, Robert, aged 10, walked beside them, trying to be brave. They left their cabin knowing they might die in the attempt, but would definitely die if they stayed. The blizzard was like walking through white chaos that actively tried to kill them. Walter couldn't see more than a few feet. Wind knocked them down repeatedly. Snow was chest-deep in drifts. The cold was so extreme that exposed skin froze in seconds. Thomas's breathing became shallower. The boy was dying in Walter's arms as they struggled forward. They became disoriented. Walter thought they'd been walking for an hour, but wasn't sure if they'd covered a mile or just circled. Emma had stopped crying, an ominous sign. Anna was stumbling, confused from her own hypothermia. Robert was crying that he couldn't feel his feet. And then Robert screamed and pointed, barely visible through the snow, a dark shape against the hillside. Daniel's cabin, the front portion looking like a conventional structure, but distinctive because of how it sat against the hillside rather than standing freely. Walter struggled the final 100 yards. When they reached Daniel's door and pounded on it, Walter was at the edge of consciousness. Thomas was completely limp in his arms. The family had maybe minutes left to live. Daniel opened his door and saw the Morrison family in crisis. Frost-covered, hypothermic, Thomas unconscious and possibly dead. He pulled them inside immediately. The front room was 45 degrees, cold by normal standards, but tropical compared to what the Morrisons had endured. Daniel got the family into the front room and wrapped Thomas in blankets near the stove. But he could see Thomas needed more than this. The boy was in severe hypothermia and wasn't responding to the front room's temperature. Daniel made a critical decision. He carried Thomas back to the underground bedroom, the one carved into the hillside that maintained 58 degrees with no heating. The stable earth-insulated temperature was warmer than the desperately heated front room. Daniel laid Thomas in his own bed in the underground chamber. The 58-degree stable temperature, the enclosed earth-insulated space, the absence of drafts. It was like putting the boy in a warm, protective cocoon. Within 20 minutes, Thomas began responding. His color improved, his breathing strengthened. The underground bedroom's constant temperature was reviving him in ways the variable front room temperature couldn't match. Anna and the other children recovered in the front room. Walter sat on the floor, trying to process what had happened. His cabin had dropped below zero and was killing his family. Daniel's cabin, the one with underground rooms Walter had called a death trap, was saving them with its hybrid design. Daniel, my cabin was -2 degrees inside, despite burning everything I could tear apart. We were dying. And your cabin? The front room is only 45 degrees, but it felt like heaven. And that back room where you put Thomas, it's actually warm. How is an underground room warmer than a heated surface room? Earth insulation. The underground room is surrounded by tons of limestone that maintains stable temperature regardless of surface conditions. I don't heat it. It stays 58 degrees naturally. The front room I heat for cooking, but the back rooms where I sleep don't need any fuel. The hybrid design uses both advantages, surface convenience and underground stability. The blizzard continued through January 16th. The Morrison family stayed in Daniel's hybrid cabin, front room for daytime activities, underground rooms for sleeping where constant 58 degrees was more comfortable than the variably heated front room. Daniel's unusual structure was sheltering 6 people comfortably using less firewood than Walter's conventional cabin had consumed while failing to protect one family. On January 17th, more desperate refugees arrived. Sarah Bennett had abandoned her conventional cabin when interior temperature dropped to 5 degrees, despite burning her furniture. She'd made the desperate journey to Daniel's place, remembering its location and betting her life that the hybrid cabin everyone mocked was better than her freezing conventional structure. Then came 2 more families, 9 additional people total, who'd heard through the desperate community network that Daniel Kovach's half-underground cabin was maintaining survivable temperature. Daniel's hybrid cabin wasn't designed for 15 people, but the structure provided options. The front room could hold several people near the stove. The 2 underground bedrooms, each 8 by 10 feet, could hold multiple people sleeping in shifts. The stable 58-degree temperature in the earth-insulated rooms meant people could sleep comfortably without heating, freeing up the heated front room for others. The scene was remarkable. 15 people sheltering in a cabin that was half conventional, half carved into a hillside. The hybrid design that everyone said was dangerous and unstable was keeping them alive, while conventional full-surface cabins sat empty and frozen, inadequate for survival. Walter Morrison stood in the underground bedroom, the one carved 15 feet into the limestone hillside with timber-supported ceiling and earth walls, and had to acknowledge what he was seeing. "I told you this was a death trap. I said the earth would collapse and bury you. I said the underground rooms would be damp, dark, and deadly. Instead, this room is warmer than my heated cabin ever achieved. It's dry and solid, and it's keeping my son alive. Daniel, your hybrid cabin that combines surface and underground construction isn't dangerous. It's the only truly safe structure within miles." The blizzard finally ended January 18th. 6 full days of brutal conditions. When people emerged and assessed damage, the results were stark. In Wyoming Territory, 39 people had died during the blizzard. 28 of those deaths were people who froze in their own cabins, structures that were supposed to protect them but became death traps when extreme cold overwhelmed conventional all-surface construction. In Daniel's hybrid cabin, 0 deaths. 15 people had sheltered in the earth-integrated structure and survived in comfort while conventional cabins froze. The survival statistics were undeniable. The hybrid cabin that everyone called a death trap had proven superior to conventional construction. The underground rooms that were supposed to collapse had remained stable and warm while surface structures failed. Word spread. Daniel Kovach's half-underground cabin had saved 15 lives during the blizzard that killed 39 people in conventional housing. People came to see the hybrid structure, walking through the conventional-looking front room, then proceeding back to find doorways leading to rooms actually carved into the hillside with limestone ceilings and earth walls. What they found challenged assumptions about safe construction. Sarah Bennett stood in the underground bedroom that had saved her life and publicly acknowledged her error. "I told Daniel that digging rooms into the earth was creating a grave to live in, that the structure would collapse and bury him, that underground living was unhealthy and deadly. I was completely wrong. This underground room stayed 58 degrees through 6 days of extreme cold, while my surface cabin dropped to 5 degrees. The earth I said would crush him actually protected him. The hybrid design I said was dangerous was actually the safest structure in the territory." Over the following months, 4 families approached Daniel about hybrid earth-integrated construction. Daniel shared his knowledge freely. "You needed stable bedrock, limestone or sandstone, proper drainage, heavy timber supports, and careful excavation following mining safety principles. Not every site was suitable, but locations with stable hillsides and southern exposures were ideal." 2 families successfully built hybrid cabins. Front portions conventional for light and access, back portions carved into hillsides for stable temperature and protection. One family's attempt failed because they built into unstable shale that required too much support. But those who followed Daniel's principles, solid bedrock, proper supports, good drainage, created structures that worked excellently. The economic impact was significant. Daniel calculated he used 60% less firewood than conventional cabins because he only heated the front room while sleeping in the naturally stable temperature underground bedrooms. His structure required minimal maintenance. The underground portions needed no weatherproofing or roof repairs, and the hybrid design provided superior temperature control year-round, cool in summer, warm in winter, all from passive earth insulation. Some people never accepted hybrid earth-integrated construction as legitimate. They insisted all surface cabins were proper, regardless of performance. But for people who'd nearly died from hypothermia in their own conventional cabins, Daniel's hybrid approach represented practical engineering that transcended conventional thinking. What Daniel had demonstrated was a principle that would later be formalized in earth-sheltered architecture. Partial underground construction provides superior thermal stability while maintaining surface access and natural light. Modern earth-sheltered homes use these same concepts, front portions above ground, back portions earth-integrated for insulation. Daniel lived in his hybrid cabin for 17 years until 1900 when he married and built a larger home. But he never regretted the hybrid design. It had proven itself during the worst conditions imaginable. The hybrid cabin stood for 32 years until 1915, when the property changed hands to owners who didn't understand earth-integrated construction and feared the underground portions were dangerous. They dismantled the structure, losing the knowledge Daniel had proven. A photograph from 1895 shows Daniel standing at his cabin with the conventional front portion visible and the hillside behind, indicating where the back rooms extended into the earth. Daniel, then 47, had proven that hybrid surface underground construction could be superior to either approach alone. And a journal entry from Walter Morrison in 1885 described the January 1884 blizzard was freezing to death in my conventional cabin with my family, temperature -2 degrees inside despite desperate fire. Made life or death journey to Daniel's hybrid cabin, expecting little help. Found front room at 45 degrees and underground bedroom at 58 degrees with zero heating. The underground room I called a death trap saved my son's life with its stable, earth-insulated temperature. Sometimes the most unconventional solution, building half surface, half underground, proves superior when conventional full-surface construction fails completely. Daniel Kovacs built a cabin that was half conventional surface structure and half carved into a limestone hillside when everyone said he was creating a death trap that would collapse and bury him. They mocked the underground rooms as dangerous, unstable and deadly, graves to live in that would crush him when the earth shifted. Then the blizzard came with 6 days of 38 below cold that froze conventional cabins to -2 degrees inside, killing 28 people in structures everyone considered safe. Daniel's hybrid cabin maintained 45 degrees in the heated front room and 58 degrees in the unheated underground bedrooms, the earth-insulated portions staying warmer than desperately heated surface rooms. The structure that was supposed to collapse stood stable. The underground rooms that were supposed to be death traps saved 15 lives with their constant earth-protected temperature. The hybrid design that was supposed to be dangerous proved safer than conventional all-surface construction when extreme conditions tested everything. Daniel didn't abandon mining knowledge when building housing. He applied it intelligently, creating hybrid earth-integrated construction that combined surface convenience with underground thermal stability. The cabin stood for 32 years. Proof that sometimes the most unconventional approach, building neither fully surface nor fully underground but combining both, creates solutions superior to conventional single-method construction.